Hey, everyone. Welcome to our Monday Hi-5. Jared Sandler with you. Thanks so much for tuning in as we do this Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And there's a lot that went down over the weekend in the sports world between the batch of NFL games and, of course, the college football games and subsequent college football playoff rankings that have determined the Final Four in the college football world. Not a surprise, Alabama and Clemson. It seemed quite unlikely that despite playing just 6 games, Ohio State would not be in there after beating Northwestern. They're in, and then obviously that controversial 4th spot went to Notre Dame instead of, say, A&M or Oklahoma or I guess a team like Cincinnati. So I want to start in the college football world before we get to the NFL, and then we'll end with the NBA since the season starts tomorrow. I know that there are some people who don't want to see the college football playoff grow beyond 4. And then there are others like me who feel like it needs to grow, whether that's 6 or 8 or more than that. I am a big believer in 8 teams. First of all, I know that there's still going to be arguments and debates over who should be in and who should not be in, but I'd much rather us debate that between the 7th, 8th, 9th, and maybe 10th best teams as opposed to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th best teams. I don't think anyone has ever said, man, I don't like the playoffs, in any sport. Now, if the NBA grew beyond 16 teams or the NHL, all right, maybe you're watering it down. But at the end of the day, playoff sports is really enjoyable. And the college football playoff expanding to 8 would not take away any level of joy, and it would still make the regular season a big challenge. It would not make the regular season just a throwaway. It's not like March Madness, and I love March Madness, but you can lose 11 games and, you're going to be in the tournament with a chance to win the whole thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. In college football, if you lose 3 games, you're probably out. You can lose 1, maybe you can lose 2, depending on who you are. But 3, you're definitely out, and 2, you might be out. You might be out as well. So I just think that we're sitting here having these arguments, and you can make a great argument for A&M. You can make a great argument for Cincinnati. You can make a great argument for Oklahoma. If you do believe that maybe a team should get credit for getting better as the year goes on, especially with a young quarterback like Spencer Rattler. You can make these arguments. Now, when you get to a team like Florida, a 3-loss team, all right, you've lost 3 games. All right, you've kind of made the argument for yourself. But when you're able to make strong arguments for teams beyond the 4 that got in, I think to me that's an indication. Let's make this thing 8. All right, let's not water it down and make it 12 or 16. Let's make it 8. It's still going to be a meaningful regular season. All right, we still love the NFL regular season, and the requirements to get into the playoffs aren't that stringent compared to the college football requirements. It's still not going to be easy. It will allow teams like Cincinnati or maybe a team like A&M this year to get in and show whether or not they actually belong, get their chance to prove that, and go from there. I just think that at the end of the day, there's more money to be had. So that's going to satisfy that requirement, because you can't make a suggestion and not consider that. There'll be more money on the TV side of it, more tickets, et cetera. Don't give me they got to be students, and it's 1 extra week's worth of games. All right. They don't care about the student side of it, and it's not going to take away from that. So I think they got to make it 8. And that leads me to point 2. Where do you, in the current system, which has a subjective element, and I don't mind the subjective element, but where do you draw the line with that degree of subjectivity? Because I'm not going to make an argument that Florida should get in. They lost 3 games. I mentioned that earlier, that they made their own case. They played Alabama, the team that is the best team in the country, better than anyone else. Could you make an argument that whether or not they deserve to be there, because they don't with 3 losses, but can you make an argument that they're one of the 4 best teams in the country? I think so. I don't think that they have one of the 4 best resumes. I think you make an argument they're one of the 4 best teams in the country, but they lost 3 games. So that makes that level of subjectivity easier to ignore. But where do you stop with the subjectivity? Because we go to point 3, Cincinnati. Cincinnati did nothing wrong. Cincinnati won their games by an average score of more than 20 points. They beat 3 top 25 teams. They're in the top 20 in the country in offense and defense. They won their conference. They were undefeated. Yet they aren't even in the top 6 in the rankings. And you know what? I'm okay with the suggestion that they're not one of the 6 best teams in the country, but I'd love to learn if they are or if they're not. And you know, them not being in the playoff, we don't learn these things. And listen, again, I don't have an issue with them not being one of the 4. But what sucks is, at least with A&M, you could say, well, you know, you lost a game. With OU, oh, you lost 2 games. Or with Florida, well, you guys lost 3 games. Cincinnati did nothing other than win every game that they played, win their conference. They won their games for the most part pretty convincingly. That to me, again, how are you not rewarding a team like that? Well, you're not rewarding a team like that because we haven't had a precedent for teams out of those conferences that suggest they're one of the 4 best in the country. But it's also not fair that, say, BYU from 2016 is impacting our decision on Cincinnati from 2020. And that's another reason why we need to make this 8 teams. Get a team like Cincinnati in there. Just because 2018 version of Cincinnati wouldn't have done the job doesn't mean that 2020 version of Cincinnati couldn't get one of those wins or make a run in the playoff. And again, would it not be exciting to at least see and learn and get another fun week of college football playoff action? There's really nothing wrong with that. All right, point 4 here. Let's go to the NFL. A few just little tidbits. 1, the Saints gave us the blueprint on how to beat Kansas City. The Saints defense gave up more than 30 points, but they were awesome. It had nothing to do with their defense. If you watch the game, they gave Kansas City as much of a problem as anyone has this year. But their offense was atrocious yesterday. It took Drew Brees, it seemed like, 3 quarters to just complete a pass. You can't go 3 and out or have really quick drives offensively that amount to nothing against the Chiefs, because at the end of the day, the Chiefs punted more yesterday than they had in any game this year. The problem is, if you give the Chiefs 10 possessions, they're going to score in, out X of those possessions. Now, if you're giving them 14 possessions because your offense can't hold on to the ball long enough to keep the Chiefs offense off the field, the Chiefs are going to score points. And that's what happened. Look at the time of possession. It was nearly 2-1 in favor of the Chiefs. Again, they punted a lot for them, but Drew Brees was so poor yesterday that it made it really tough for the Saints. I think the Saints have a ceiling because of Drew Brees. I think we're at that point in his career where he's holding him back. I'm honestly not even sure that he's their best option. I know that's crazy to suggest, but there's a good chance, at least for me, that Taysom Hill is their best bet as this team's starting quarterback to actually make a deep run. But we saw the Saints are capable of beating them if they get just a little bit more out of Drew Brees. Now, as far as another team that I think has a chance to beat the Saints, or excuse me, the Chiefs, because of their defense, the Los Angeles Rams. They are officially the most perplexing team in 2020. They go 1 week and they look like they're the best team of the NFC. And then the next week you're like, I don't know. And then the week after, no, they're really good. And then they go and they lose to the Jets at home. I don't know what the hell to make out of the Los Angeles Rams. I do think Sean McVay is a really good coach, but they are incredibly confusing. And I guess it's fitting because the NFC is a big wild card to begin with. But I have no clue what to make of the Rams. All right, finally, the NBA is upon us. The season starts tomorrow. For years, I've kind of been down on the Mavericks, as have a lot of people. But I really think they have a legitimate chance to be the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. I don't know that they're the favorites. They're not. The Lakers are the best team in the conference. I think the Nuggets are a little bit ahead of the next group, but I do think that they're within the next group of teams that include the Jazz, the Clippers, the Warriors, even without Clay, the Nuggets, and the Mavericks. I think that any team from that group could finish second. I think the Jazz are kind of on the bottom of that group. I think the Nuggets are at the top, and then the others are sort of in the middle, and I have Portland just outside of that group of consideration. But this is a special Mavs team, and the reason why, yes, Luke is outstanding. We know that. But he's got an actual roster around him. All right, adding Josh Richardson, that is such a good fit. Adding some defensive toughness on the bench, not just guys who can shoot 3 and not play any D. They got legitimate defensive assets on their team, both in the post and in the backcourt. All right, are these guys who are going to play 30-plus minutes? Not necessarily, but you don't need that. They can match up now way better this year than they've been able to in the past, and I also think that we'll see a step forward from Luka. I'm really excited for this Mavs season. I'm going to go ahead and say they finished third in the West behind the Nuggets, but I would not be surprised, and of course the Lakers, but I would not be surprised if they finished first. There you go. That's our Monday high five. We'll talk to you Wednesday.